that everybody stays on mute. If you're anything like me, you've probably got a lot of noise in the background. And since we've got so many people joining us this morning, it'll just be a much nicer experience if everybody's on mute and that if we have our video turned off as well. If I can ask everyone to take this opportunity to just pop your name and your organisation in there. You can go to the participants, find your name, rename and pop in there, or much easier, if you want to just pop on the 3 little dots where your picture is and just change your name. And this gives us a chance to take a registration for this morning's presentations. Though we're asking you to keep your mic on mute, that doesn't mean you can't chat to us. Please feel free to use the chat box during the event. Say hi and submit questions. There will be time after the presentations for the question and answer. So if you have any questions that pop up while you're going through, please feel free to pop them in the chat box and we'll come to them later on. Now the event will be recorded and later on today you'll receive the link to the Scope website, the project report, along with a copy of the slides as well. And of course, we might as well shout about what fabulous stuff we're doing here. So please, if you're on social media, hashtag ScopeEU and tag us Ancason, The Wheel, Largus, EU Erasmus Plus, Scope and Platform. But don't forget hashtag ScopeEU. Let's see if we can get it trending today. So I'm going to hand over to Deirdre now, and I hope you all have a really great session.
Thanks a million, Lynn, and very much welcome to everybody. I'm just going to check with my colleague Lauren to make sure that I can be heard and seen.
You can indeed, Deirdre.
Thanks very much. So we're absolutely delighted to have everybody here this morning for the Scope Multiplier event. And as you're well used to hearing at this stage, we'd have loved to have hosted you in a full day in-person event, but that was not to be. So we're here virtually instead. And today marks a really significant day for both The Wheel and indeed Ancason, our project partners and joint hosts this morning. And I should have said that for those who don't know me, I'm Chief Executive Officer with The Wheel, and I'll be introducing Heidi, who comes after me, who is the Chief Executive of Ancason. So Scope is our very first Erasmus Plus project for both organisations, and we're really proud to share our outputs with you after 2 years of work in the background. And my colleagues and the speakers will be sharing more detailed information on Scope over the course of the morning. So first things first, Scope stands for and means skills recognition, capacity building and professional development for the third sector. And again, this being a European-wide programme, the language third sector isn't so much in use in this country, very much so. When third sector gets mentioned, I think we would tend to think of community and voluntary sector. So just to sort of, make that translation for those who are relatively new to our sector. So The Wheel is the lead partner for the Scope project on this occasion, and we've been working with 5 other organisations, including Ancason here in Ireland, but other partners based in Estonia, Finland, Scotland and Latvia. And our partners across Europe are actually carrying out similar activities today in their respective countries. So, and as mentioned earlier, they too will be using the hashtag ScopeEU. So we can definitely get this trending, not just in Ireland, but internationally, if we give it some welly. So please join the online conversation using that hashtag ScopeEU, all one word. So it's widely acknowledged that a healthy, thriving, transparent and informed third sector or community and voluntary sector is the vehicle for achieving common European goals. And from small local action groups fighting social exclusion to the largest organisations addressing international issues, the third sector is really, really imperative in putting high-level policy into practice at community level. It's like the invisible infrastructure of our society that's often overlooked and misunderstood. But really, as we all know, the truth of the matter is that community level is where the real change happens and where high-level policy set at EU or national level takes effect for real people and real lives. So the partners involved in this project are all organisations whose core purpose is to support and serve the third sector in our respective countries. So it's our job, collectively and individually, to provide training, support, advice and advocacy that they need so that they can do what they do best, which is to create positive change in communities and people's lives. So we have the network and expertise respectively to reach this, let's call it this invisible infrastructure that plays such a vital role in cultivating a better future for Europe. However, we're often met with challenges in achieving our mission. And the following are the 5 key challenges identified specifically around the provision of training that this project aimed to address. And they are geographical, financial, accessibility, the voluntary nature of the sector, and indeed the validation of learning. So you'll hear today how the newest tool in the sector's toolbox has addressed each of those challenges and how the partner organisations in each country will adopt the new tool in an integrated way with other upskilling services for their respective sectors that they themselves deploy. So as we go forward, I'd like to acknowledge, first of all, the importance of funding programmes like Erasmus+. It has granted us the opportunity to collaborate on a project like this for the very first time, and it was very new for us and we learned a lot. We brought in skills and practices from other partners in Ireland and indeed in other countries that we just wouldn't have been able to fill internally. So what felt like a huge and rather daunting undertaking back in 2018 became a realistic project thanks to the contributions made by our partners. And transnational cooperation like this is just really important to us, and we see the strength of such partners. So really appreciate that very much to them. And also to Lergus, our funder here in Ireland, and the national agency for Erasmus Plus here in Ireland. So Lergus has been extremely supportive over the past 2 years. We couldn't have looked for a better funding partner in that way. We really appreciate your guidance in Lergus and look forward to continuing on our Erasmus Plus journey as the new Erasmus Plus programme kicks off in 2021 for us here in the Wheel and indeed other partners. We believe that Scope is an important training tool for our members and for the wider sector. It provides entry-level training in governance, finance, risk management, communications and fundraising. It's free and open access and will remain as such. And I had the opportunity to test it out myself over the last week. And I have to say, I was absolutely blown away by the work that's been done by all of the organisations. So thank you very much to them too. So alongside the online training, your learning, which I think is really exciting, will be validated using the new validation system, digital badges. And we recognise the wealth of non-formal learning in our sector that we want to champion, and our learning and development through our validation system, digital badges. And Heidi, I'm sure, will speak a lot more about that. So, but this is a first step in promoting, capturing and communicating skills better. The Wheel is committed to endorsing the importance of this type of validation going forward, but again, more to follow on that later in the event. So in terms of the sustainability and exploitation of Scope, the Wheel will integrate Scope into our existing programmes and training. We will look to develop Scope or similar online training that validates learning in order to continuously address the needs of our sector, build capacity and ensure training can be accessed easily and without barriers, such as location or limited resources, such as staff or indeed funding. We have very recently more than doubled the size of our own upskilling team within the Wheel and indeed developed our thinking around training and capacity building into a more integrated concepts of upskilling, learning and indeed lifelong learning in the context of delivering the missions and visions of our respective third sector organisations or community organisations. So you'll be seeing a lot more of our new and developing programmes over the coming months. But I'm now going to hand you over to Heidi Foster, CEO of Untitled, and Heidi will talk to us about the importance of e-learning, skills recognition and professional development in the third sector. I have to say, a subject about which she personally and indeed everyone at Untitled has unparalleled excellence in. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with the team. So I'm now going to switch my microphone off, turn my camera off and hand the floor, or rather the screen, over to Heidi.
Thanks, Deidre. Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here at the launch of Scope. This collaboration to develop a dedicated online learning tool with accreditation for third sector and social enterprise organization is a fantastic example of how we can work together to address capacity and skills deficits in our sector. Untitled works with some of the most disadvantaged and vulnerable communities across Ireland. We provide online learning pathways up to degree level, as well as early year services to provide a one-generation solution to tackle poverty. We were at the front line of embracing technology to advance our educational mission. We are very much committed to tackling Ireland's digital divide, which sees half of our adult population having only basic digital skills. Consequently, half our adult population struggles with the digital skills, which are now very much core to work, life, and learning. We are delighted to support initiatives such as Scope, any and all innovations which help progress the upskilling and capacity building of our sector are welcome and so very critical now. We hope the tool will support and empower our colleagues across the third sector, allowing them to better fulfill their social missions. As social sector organizations, we are all very aware of the vital importance of areas such as fundraising, prudent financial management, good governance, risk management, and effective communications. These are behind the scenes activities that support the sustainability of our organizations. We need these skill sets in order to be able to plan appropriately, to raise awareness of our work, connect with those who need our support, and engage effectively with those who can make that support possible. And in the end, it is these skills that allow us to deliver the impact of our missions as effectively as possible for those we serve, so that they can improve their opportunities and lives. Oncosan was delighted to partner with our European colleagues in Scotland, Finland, Latvia, and Estonia, and our Irish colleagues at the wheel in the design and development of this tool. Together, through collaborative working and drawing on each other's skill sets, experience, and talents, we can innovate using technology to create great things and enhance learning and development in our sector. As a leader and advocate of lifelong learning, Oncosan understands the importance of breaking down the barriers that many individuals and organizations face in accessing education and training. Whether those challenges are location, financial, device accessibility, or time, we believe e-learning can provide a solution. E-learning has never been more critical, as it provides the opportunity to access at a time and place to suit you. We need to encourage and support adult learners to be adaptive and have a growth mindset towards lifelong learning and e-learning. Minister Simon Harris recently said that the further education sector has for too long been the Cinderella of the Irish education system. We have recently engaged with the Minister and his new department to raise awareness of the digital divide in Ireland and how it is affecting our learners and staff. Oncosan welcomes the new technology and learning solutions being developed by the sector. Third sector organizations will play a vital role in supporting our post-COVID recovery. I am delighted to see this skills-based learning has been designed to provide third sector workers with digital accreditation for their upskilling. Fortunately, we have seen good progress in the recognition of diverse types of learning, such as traineeships and apprenticeships. We need to continue to value the diversity of learning options available across the system. There is huge diversity of skills in the social sector. We can see this in the incredible and innovative approaches that have been rapidly deployed in the fight to ensure support for communities during this COVID pandemic. Those working for third sector organizations and social enterprises have all stepped up to give their all. We need to ensure that they are also supported within their roles. Our staff need to be able to learn and plan for the new future ahead of us. The pandemic has also shown the importance of the digital world and the skills we all require to live and work within it. People have been adapting and they need the right support to do so. It is with tools like Scope that we can enable people to adapt, to achieve continuous development, and build their own capacity and that of their organization. I think we agree that governance, financial management, fundraising, communications, and risk are the 5 pillars of all organizations. These are comprehensively addressed within Scope. We know the challenges organizations face ensuring that staff and volunteers get the training they need. Training can be costly, difficult to find, the time to access, and can require having to travel long distances. It is also often difficult to ensure skills gained are properly acknowledged and enhance career options and opportunities. Scope recognizes and validates prior learning in the fields available, allows you to build on your knowledge, and provides accreditation in the form of digital badges. And it's all free. Did you hear that? It is free. By leveraging our skills in online learning, we can ensure that it can be accessed easily and in a way that is flexible for time and location. Oncosan has over 33 years experience in engagement with community and social enterprise organizations. Our mission is to empower through education. We do that by providing people of all ages with pathways to learning, leadership, and enterprise. We meet people where they're at in their learning and support those that are the furthest behind to reach their potential. We have built strong collaborative relationships with over 160 organizations nationally, to whom we deliver continuous professional development, such as technology-enhanced learning. It is also through this vibrant community network that Oncosan delivers its foundation, further and higher education programs to learners across Ireland. We do this face-to-face and also online. Drawing on all of this learning, we know that we can reach out and provide a real added value to enhance the work of organizations across Ireland. We all know about the digital divide. We know that 53% of Irish people do not have the basic digital skills needed to survive and thrive in an increasingly digital world. And we know that many of the community organizations assisting those in disadvantage do not have the resources, the technology, or the funding to begin to help those being left behind. In acknowledgement of the need to upskill and tackle this growing and now very pressing problem within our sector, Oncosan has, with other partners, created a free suite of tools which are easily accessible and available to all partner organizations. Scope will be included along with other tools we are rolling out, such as digital stepping stones, our basic digital skills assessment using DigComp, the European Digital Competence Framework. Also, Skills to Succeed Academy, developed by Accenture, is a free online employability skills platform. Scope is a new resource which we will promote in order to develop and recognize third sector skills. Along with our partners across Europe, we will ensure that Scope is included as a core part of the work that we do. We will ensure that staff joining our own organization will receive training using Scope. I ask all of you here today to ensure that you too include it for your staff so that they can be given the best skills and knowledge they need. Finally, I want to acknowledge the dedication of all those involved over the past 2 years. Special thanks to the efforts of our own tech team, Matthew Waters and Shane Regan, for the contribution to this innovative product. I would also like to thank The Wheel. Their incredible work on this and other projects is vital to the success of the third sector. Finally, thank you to Lergas and all our European partners who have been with us on this journey. We look forward to learning from you all as you embark on this learning journey with Scope. We hope to hear your feedback and to take this on board to make this the very best platform for all involved. To be enabled to deliver change for the communities who need our support, our sector needs to be the very best it can be. Learning and development is key to the growth of our individual staff and the quality of our sector. Scope is an important resource for all of us in supporting that learning and development. Gracias. I'm going to now go on mute and turn off my camera.
Thanks a million, Heidi. Good morning, everybody. My name is Lauren Carroll. I'm the Programme Manager at The Wheel, and for the last 2 years, I have been the coordinator for the Scope project. So this morning, I'd like to share with you an overview of the project as well as our partnership. We will get to hear from more colleagues in The Wheel and Uncasan in more detail about each of the intellectual outputs that we have been working on over the past 2 years. And there will be plenty of time for questions and answers at the end of the presentations. So as mentioned by Lynn at the start, please do pop your questions into the chat box. My colleague Emma will be moderating it throughout the event. So your questions might be in relation to scope, some of the details of the project itself, maybe in relation to Erasmus Plus funding. So if you can pop into the chat box, we will keep an eye on that and come back to it at the end. So for now, I'm just going to share my presentation with you. Bear with me. Great. Okay, so you're very welcome to the Multiplier. I wanted to start with just a photograph of our lovely colleagues from the Scope team. This picture was taken in Tallinn in Estonia last October from our training event that we participated in as a group. It was actually the last time that we met in person because of COVID and the impact that has had on our ability to travel to each of the partner countries. But there are some familiar faces in this photograph, and you will hear from Mairead and Shane shortly. So I suppose let's get into it. In The Wheel, we identified that there was, a couple of challenges or a couple of barriers that Deirdre had mentioned earlier in relation to access and training. It could be location. Maybe you are based in a rural community and it's difficult to get to an urban setting where training is taking place, or lack of resources, for example, your staff time or funding, or capacity to leave your organisation, particularly if you're a small organisation and you as one person or one staff member are responsible for the day-to-day running of many parts of the organisation. And we also noted that accessible training was something that we wanted to improve. So we saw the need for more accessible training resources and skills recognition for our sector. And we had in mind small organisations in particular, so those organisations with 5 or fewer staff. So what was our response? We wanted to move learning online to increase accessibility and create a skills validation system, just to recognise the skills and competencies within our sector here in Ireland and across the European third sector. And the result was Scope. So it is the training tool and validation system that we will be presenting to you today. And when I say validation system, I'm talking about digital badges. And again, we will give you more detail on them as they're quite new to us here in Ireland. But we will explore them in a little bit more detail over the course of the morning. So in a nutshell, Scope is an online training resource. It has been developed through a 2-year strategic partnership that has been funded by Erasmus Plus, and that has been supported by Lergus. Lergus are the national agency for Erasmus Plus here in Ireland, and I've linked their website here on the slides, which you will receive afterwards, so you can click through and have a look at the Lergus website later on. With Scope, we wanted to target small nonprofit organisations. So those organisations that had 5 or fewer staff. But just to say, now at this stage of the project, as we are launching and sharing this training tool with you, Scope is open to everybody. So there are no limitations on the size of your organisation. It is a great tool for all. We are proud to present 5 training modules in the fundamentals of governance, communications, risk, finances, and fundraising. And as Heidi mentioned, these are the 5 pillars of the, I suppose, management of our nonprofit organisations, including charities, community and voluntary groups, and social enterprises. We have linked a digital badge to each of the training modules. So the purpose of that is to validate your learning and to communicate your learning. And we also piloted the Scope project twice. So we went through quite a rigorous testing phase with testers across Europe, members of each of our partner organisations. And we've produced a project study that will be shared with you following this event. And that outlines a lot of what we did over the 2 years, as well as our learnings, our wins, and our plans for the future, and how we're going to sustain and exploit Scope going forward. So you saw a picture of the partners at the beginning. We are a partnership made up of 6 organisations. So the wheel led on this project. Our Irish partners, Uncasan, were the technical experts. We had a partner in Finland, Civis Study Centre, a Scottish partner, SCVO, or the Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations, ACU, based in Estonia, and Civic Alliance Latvia, who are based in Riga. The partners, I feel, are really what have made this project very special. So they're the reason that, you know, we were successful in the delivery of this project. And I just wanted to share some insights in relation to finding partners and building good relationship with partners. And I think what was very important to us in the wheel was aligning ourselves with partners that were committed to this project in the same way that we were committed to the project, and that had the right skills and the right experience, as well as the capacity to be able to fulfill their role in the project. So we invested quite a lot of time at the beginning, so even before application stage, in finding our partners, and we tapped into our existing networks. We spoke to colleagues that had worked in European programs as well as Erasmus Plus projects. We looked for recommendations for our partners, and we met with all partners a number of times before the project was even granted successful. So I suppose we did a lot of vetting at the beginning, which really stood to us. We built the application in consultation with the partners so that there was agreement and understanding from everyone as to what we were committing to for the Scope project. And I think that this was a really great start for us, and it just helped improve our working relations over the course of the 2 years, and it gave us a really good foundation to kick off from. So as a group of 6 organisations coming together for the first time and working in an international partnership, we agreed a certain number of things that we thought would be important for our success. And again, these stood to us, and they were very clear understanding of our roles and responsibilities. We agreed upon achievable deadlines for each of our intellectual outputs, and this was led by the output leader in consultation with the partners, and we agreed to those deadlines together. We were committed to regular reporting and monitoring. So all partners reported to the wheel as the coordinator on a quarterly basis. These were both activity reports and financial reports. So it allowed us to stay on track, to monitor our progress regularly. And it also gave the opportunity to partners to maybe flag some concerns or something that was coming up that they weren't quite sure about. That worked really well for us. We were very committed to open and honest communications. At our very early kickoff meeting back in October 2018, we agreed upon a flagging system. And the idea of this was that, you know, if myself in the wheel was unable to meet a deadline and I needed more time, I would go to the leader of the particular piece of work or intellectual output and let them know early, so that we could come up with an alternative plan together. And the idea is you didn't ever have to escalate a problem or get to a place where there was an issue or there was a conflict. And this worked very, very well for us. And we also agreed that we would be flexible and adaptive as a partnership. And I guess where this stood to us was when COVID happened, there were certain project activities that needed to be adapted. Our final partner meeting, for example, was due to take place in Scotland in May, but we couldn't do that. So we needed to meet online. So we, made the changes that we needed to make, and we met together online over the course of 2 days. Similarly, this Multiplier event would have been a full one-day conference in person with all of our partners showcasing their intellectual outputs, but we needed to adapt and change our plans with a few weeks' notice. And here we are online. And actually, I think that this was a real opportunity for us because it reflects what we're trying to do through the Scope project. It has allowed us now, as I look at the numbers, to bring 200 people together this morning to learn about Scope and to learn about the partner process that we have gone through. So I'm really happy that we actually have got to come together online virtually to meet this morning. So what exactly did we do for 2 years? We were concentrating on 4 intellectual outputs. There will be more detail of these outputs over the course of the morning, but essentially they were content development led by the wheel, website build and development along with the Adapt platform led by Unkasan, so the technical side of the project. We produced the validation system by our very experienced colleagues in Finland. They had a lot of experience of digital badges, which were something that's used in Finland, less so here, but something that we're very, very enthusiastic about and see a lot of potential with. And finally, there was intellectual output 4, split into 2 parts. So the project study and the pilot, and that was led by our Scottish partners. Other activities included the joint staff training event that was held last October. This was really important for our project because this allowed us the opportunity to come together as 6 partner organisations with a bigger group of colleagues than had been involved in the project previously. And the purpose of this was that we would train in all things scope. So we would train each other on our own intellectual output, and at the end of the 3 days, we would leave the training event as scope experts. So we would then be able to support you as learners at this stage of the project. Dissemination was something that affected all partners and ran throughout the project, managed by our Latvian colleagues. Project management, again, affected all partners. It was the day-to-day running of the project. Transnational meetings and online meetings, again, all partners were involved. We met 3 times in 2 years. It should have been 4, only for the disruption by COVID. And just another note on the transnational meetings, what stood out to me is the importance of making the most of your transnational meetings. If you think of a 2-year project and the fact that you only have the opportunity to meet face-to-face 3 or maybe 4 times in 2 years, it's vital that you make the most of that time together. And then our final project activity is the Multiplier event that we're attending today. And all other partners are hosting their Multiplier events today. So if you do want to join the online conversation, the hashtag is #ScopeEU. So some learnings. What we learned was that some content was difficult for partners to adapt and translate. As it was written through English, all partners had to adapt it and translate it into their own language. It was more time consuming than we had initially considered, particularly in the governance module. As legislation differs country to country, not only did partners have to translate, but they had to make it right for their national context. So it had to be adapted to suit the legislation in each country. We learned that principle-based content was more friendly and more transferable across partner countries. So something like the communications module can be easily translated across partner languages. We, in the early days of Scope, had in-depth discussions about building in a login or a user profile into the Scope platform. Together, we decided that it was something that we weren't going to do for a number of reasons. However, on reflection, we now feel that it would be beneficial to have a login for things like data collection, monitoring, and tracking the use of Scope. So it's just something to consider for future development of this project or similar projects. And I guess a reflection of the numbers here today and those who participated in the pilots over the course of the project is that there is a real appetite and a real need for e-learning opportunities within our sector. A couple of our wins that I wanted to share. We now have a 5-module online training tool available in all partner languages, 5 digital badges, again available in all partner languages, with a 6th bumper badge, which is automatically awarded to what we're calling Scope alumni, so those people who have completed all 5 modules. We were really lucky to have been a member of a creative and energetic partnership. So as I mentioned earlier, kind of the time that was invested into building the partnership at the beginning really stood to us. And we now have been able to benefit from the experiences and the skills of other organizations. And that was our kind of piece of magic that made us successful. All of our skills brought together were what made this project possible. We may not have been able to achieve it in our organizations alone. So it was the collaborative nature of this Scope project that really got us to where we are today. We have a network of new partners and colleagues that we will continue to work with. And as a first timer to an Erasmus Plus project, the experience has been fantastic and the learning has been so rich. We know things that we will carry into future projects and we know things that we want to improve for future. So both sides of the coin, really, really great. So lots of really rich learning and lots of wins over the course of the 2 years. So that's just an overview of the project. As I said, we'll move into a more detailed look at each of the intellectual outputs now. So I'm going to hand you over to my colleague Mairead, who will speak about output 1, the content development, and I will chat to you a little bit later on in the event. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Lauren. Thank you very much. And I am delighted to be here today. I am the Skills Development Senior Manager at The Wheel. And as with my other colleagues, this was my first experience of an Erasmus Plus project. And I have to say, from the skills team perspective within The Wheel, this was a really exciting project to be involved in, because it's the actual output at the end of it, the result of it is such a really useful tool that's core to the work that we do day to day, which is working with our members and the wider sector to build capacity within organisations to achieve their mission. That's it, simply put. And this scope tool, we feel, is going to be a really valuable addition to, I suppose, the range of training and supports that we provide and that the sector in Ireland can access. So we're very, very excited about today and the fact that we're launching it out to the world through yourselves here today. So delighted to be here. I was involved in what is called Intellectual Output 1 within the project terms, but is essentially the learning content and the development of the content of the platform. So that's what I'm going to be taking you through over the next few minutes, to get a sense, I suppose, of how we did it and the thought process behind the learning content. And also, I suppose, just to give you a sense of how this kind of work is done within a transnational partnership like this, if that is of interest to you. So the first thing to say, I suppose, is that the Intellectual Output 1, as its name suggests, was probably the first piece of work, the first substantial piece of work that we engaged in as a partnership. And it was very busy at the beginning. We front-loaded the work on this development piece at the start, and all the partners were involved in it, and it was very intense in the early stages of the project. We were leading on it, but everybody was involved. All partners were involved in the development process. And there were a few characteristics that were set out, if you like, from the very beginning in the application, and they kind of gave us the parameters in which we then worked to develop the content. The first was that we identified 5 key topics. You've heard already that referenced by the other speakers: governance, finance, fundraising, risk, and communications. So that had already been decided, and it had been identified through the research that had been done in the early project development stages, looking at the needs that our members in the wider sector had communicated to us here in Ireland and in our partner countries as well. So it had been well tested and well thought out. Also, the decision had been made that this would be a taster course, if you like, or basic entry-level programs that we would be developing in this project. And they were aimed at smaller organizations, as Lauren has said, with 5 or fewer staff. The approach, the pedagogical approach in this case that we were taking, was learner outcomes. And this is, I suppose, for those of you who haven't heard of this approach before, it basically takes us to a clear statement of what the learner will know or be able to do at the end of the training program. That's the idea of taking a learner outcomes approach, by kind of stating at the start, what is it that you're hoping the person who participates will be able to do, or they will know the end of the process. And it's the preferred methodology right across the education world, because it places, as is clear, the learner at the centre. And I suppose it makes really explicit what you're hoping to achieve with the project. And in that way, it's really great process to use. And I suppose the other aspect that's of benefit when using learner outcomes approach is that it also helps us to link in with other standards. For example, the European qualifications framework, the EQF, it allows us to link the work that we were doing at Scope with the kind of wider policy agenda. So it was that was I suppose what drove our the pedagogical approach within the project. Content types. So we were kind of looking at developing learner content that was principles based, and gave, I suppose, the learner a grounding in the concepts, basic concepts around the 5 topics. But we also wanted to make sure that we linked it with real world experience of the learners. So we were going to use case studies and quizzes to test understanding and to make it as interactive as possible. We knew we were going to be using creating a static online learning tool. We want to make it as interactive as possible. The other element, I suppose, was that across our 6 partner organizations, we were going to be providing standard content, but we obviously knew from the start that we were going to have flexibility for partners to adapt and to translate the materials both into the local language, but also into the local context. So that was something that we were aware of, but knew it was going to be a challenge, and that's something that I suppose that we had to build into the process that we used to develop the content. And there's again a reminder of the 5 topics that you'll find, the 5 modules on the Scope platform. So the actual process then that we used to develop the content itself, I'm just going to take you through one of the modules, which is the governance module. We use that as an example. And it was the first one that we built or designed, if you like, the content for. And the idea was we'd go through the full process with one module so that we could see where maybe the challenges, the obstacles, the pitfalls were. And were we glad we did that? Absolutely, because we did find there was lots of learning for us the first time out. So that kind of trial process was really, really worthwhile, because we learned an awful lot, and it allowed us then to be able to tweak our process for the rest of the modules. So the governance scripting process was kind of the first piece of work that we did, and I'm just going to take you through that here. So we spent a lot of time at the very beginning looking at the learning objectives, so that learning outcomes model, what we were aiming for, that the learner would be able to do or to understand at the end of completing the governance modules. We spent a lot of time actually hammering that out between the partners. That was a hugely important piece, and I'll come to that in a little while. We were really glad we did that. Following on from hammering out what it was that we wanted the learner to achieve, if you like, at the end of the process, ourselves in the wheel and on Kassan, our partners on the technology side, worked to create a design of what the module would look like. So the kinds of activities, if you like, that the participant would engage in when they got to the online platform. And as a result, then we kind of knew what ingredients we were going to play with in order to create the platform. And it was then with knowing what tools we had in the toolkit and understanding what we wanted the learner to be able to take from the platform, Wheel created then the first draft of the script, if you like, the content that the learner would engage with when they were on the platform. So we created a first draft, which took the elements of the kind of activities and the content, and we then sent that out for feedback to our partners all across Europe. And this was the big learning for us, is that there was an awful lot of feedback in that process. So we had both on the content, on the activity types, the kind of delivery methods. There was a huge amount of learning in that process, and a lot of conversations happened at that time. And then that fed into a second draft of the script, which we produced as a result of that feedback. And that second draft then went back out for a second round of feedback. And that, of course, is where, you know, there was an awful lot of time required and a lot of both on our side in terms of actually the drafting and redrafting, but also we had to let our partners know that they were going to, you know, when they would receive the second draft, how long they had in order to get feedback back to us. So you can kind of see the kind of juggle that it is when you're dealing with a complex project like this and multiple partners. But the actual final result, the script that came out of it then, was so much stronger because of that. so much more robust and a much better script because of that process. And that's where I think, from my point of view as someone involved in the drafting and the scripting, it was a much better experience than if I had been, drafting something here on my own. The actual, the richness that we got from that interaction with our partners was hugely, hugely valuable. So in terms of the learning, I suppose, from that process, and you can see the kind of involved nature of it, give it time. Huge amount of time needed, but it was so worth it. And that was what we learned from doing the governance process first. When we came then to drafting the 4 other scripts, we were able to do it in parallel, but we understood that we were going to need lots of time for partners to give feedback, and we built that into the timeline. Feedback is iterative, so there was a process of redrafting scripts, and some of them went through a few different drafts, and that was really important, and I think has led to us having a really strong product at the end of the process. The context in the partner countries is very different. Lauren alluded to that in her presentation as well. So obviously you're dealing with very different cultural contexts, legal contexts for the work of the third sector in each country. But the feedback actually, for the most part, was often applicable across the board. And that was really interesting and again, really helpful. I think everyone involved in the project has a whole new perspective on how civil society operates in different contexts and what we can learn from each other, which was really, really important. Spending time on getting the learning objectives right from the start was hugely important, because I suppose once we knew what it was we were trying to achieve, and making sure that those learning objectives, while taking into account the different contexts, were applicable and universal across the 6 partner countries, that actually allowed us then we could take different routes to get there, but the learning objectives for each partner were the same. And that was key. If we hadn't done that, we'd have come a cropper. So taking the time to make sure that you understand what is it ultimately that you have a shared vision for the platform and for each module was really, really important. And just to say it again, the partnership was so beneficial, and I found the feedback process just really, really important, and I learned so much from it personally, and it has just really enriched my own practice as a trainer as well. So really, couldn't praise that process enough, and how it was managed as well from a project management point of view. So the final product, I'm just going to give you a sense of it, kind of from screenshots. You're going to be getting a link after today's session, and I'm sure you're all going to be virtually running off to try it out. And I really would encourage you to do that and to log on and have a look, play around with it. But just to give you a flavour of what it looks like and the kind of what you might encounter when you're on the Scope platform. Each of the modules has, I suppose, a high-level introduction when you come onto the website, and then also is broken down into 5 or 6 topic areas. So kind of areas that you will, different topics under each of the 5 modules. So for example, in the governance module, you'll find out what a governing body is, what it does, what regulations say in your country, and what makes an effective governing body. You then recap all of your learning on a further topic, and then you can unlock your badge. And you'll be learning more about those later. The kinds of content vary. You'll find blocks of text like this, which describes key pieces of learning and key areas of interest under each of the modules. You also find these interactive tables, and we were really pleased when we were working with Cassandre that we could integrate lots of different ways for the learner to engage across the platform. So it's not a passive process. You can kind of click in, you have a bit of autonomy as to where you want to go next and how you interact with the content. There are lots of quizzes all across the platform, so that these offer formative opportunities for the learner to check their understanding as they move through the platform and make sure that they are, I suppose, reaching the learning objectives as they move through, and the feedback that they get if, for example, the answer they give is wrong, sends them back to where they can check their learning and refresh their understanding. There are also case studies, as I mentioned, which links the learning back to the real world scenarios. And you'll find this Ballykilcar Community Action Group on the Irish platform appears across all 5 modules. So hopefully it helps to integrate the learning into the real world experience of community organisations. As I said, the learner then recaps all of that work in the kind of 6th and final topic. And once they complete that recap successfully, then they can apply for their digital badge. And you'll be finding out more about that later on this morning. In terms of how the platform then was tested and the results of that, we were very, very pleased in the pilot, after both piloting phases, that the participants in the pilot were really satisfied with the platform. We had 98% rated that they were very satisfied or satisfied with the quality of the content. And that was across all of our partner groups. 77% reported increased capacity in all 5 module areas, and 92% reported increased confidence in all 5 module areas. So that was really, we were really, really pleased with those results in the pilot. And it was a very rigorous pilot process, so I'm very happy with that. And I suppose the final thing to say is that, as I said, there's a huge element of learning in it, but really the platform will live and breathe once yourselves who are here at this launch and the organisations that you're linked with begin to use it. And we'd really love to get your feedback as you begin to roll it out after today. So that is it from me for the moment on the content side, and I'm going to hand over now to Shane Regan, who was our hugely valuable technical partner in Oncasan and who really built the platform, and he's going to take you through the actual platform itself and the building of it from a technological point of view and the how learners are expected to interact with it. So over to you, Shane.
Hi, Maria. Thanks very much for that. So everyone, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly show you kind of some of the thought process that went into the platform at the back end. And then probably because you're all dying to see it, I'll give you a tour of the platform itself, show you how you can access it, and point out maybe some of the features such as accessibility that we put a lot of time and effort into, and that hopefully will make the platform as accessible as possible for the entire charity sector. I think I have a strict kind of limit here of 15 minutes, so if I get muted or if I get the curly finger, it's because I've gone over. So apologies if that happens. So just briefly, what I want to do first is I just want to give you a small kind of introduction into the work that went on and kind of Oncasan's role in it. So I'm just going to start presenting there. So just in terms very briefly of kind of Oncasan and where we came from and how we got involved in kind of e-learning and that kind of aspect of it. Oncasan has been around for about 30 years in the community education sector, and in that time something like 18,000 people have been guided through the gates of Oncasan into kind of new pathways and taking their first steps back into education or even into higher education. And Oncasan is recognized nationally as a leader in kind of that space. And then as Oncasan's work developed throughout the years, this idea of championing the use of technology to increase its reach became more apparent as kind of a key priority. So Oncasan was very keen to expand its reach nationally as opposed to kind of focusing on its kind of traditional heartland in Dublin. In terms of kind of the general services that Oncasan offers, it offers everything from early years, childcare, family support, to adult ed, kind of access education, very basic level training, to higher ed courses and further level. We also though focus on unaccredited learning for personal development, such as well-being, digital skills, ICT skills, and then there's also kind of external services such as counselling, wraparound supports that are there for learners as well. So there's a full kind of package and range of services and utilities that the organisation offers. And then in terms of kind of this project scope and kind of getting involved in this virtual space. So since 2014, through the Virtual Community College or VCC initiative with Oncasan, Oncasan has become innovators in the space of providing online community education. So that was something that Oncasan moved into. And currently, even Uncasan runs multiple online blended higher and further education courses. And they've been doing that for a number of years very successfully. And that kind of role and criteria is expanding. And because of that, then we kind of have internal kind of educational technology experts, so people who were able to contribute to this field. And then it was, you know, against this background of innovation and e-learning expertise that Uncasan was able to contribute to the Scope project, and in particular kind of the technical kind of e-learning aspect. So in terms of, you know, kind of the kind of work that went into the background, Uncasan's responsibility is very simple. We're to build the whole thing. So to build the website and the platform, which I'm going to show you in a couple of minutes. Our duties were, it had to be very responsive. So we are obviously very keen to make it as accessible as possible, regardless of whatever device you're using, be that laptop, mobile phone, tablet. And we also had to work then, you know, with Mairead O'Connor and getting, you know, her great content and her great ideas, and just, you know, getting that into a way that would appear nice on screen. We also had to find a solution and convert the badging system. We had to handle and implement translations into Finnish, Latvian, and Estonian, which was interesting to say the least, but it was a good experience. And we also had to alter content for the Scottish version. So I'll show you on the platform, you'll see a little Scottish badge. Obviously, Scottish more or less speak the same language as us, but there's small kind of differences there in their content. Things we put big effort into were meeting AAA kind of accessibility guidelines. So anyone who might have a visual impairment or who would be using a screen reader to access, we made big efforts to make sure that everything we made was accessible to those users. And then we undertook a lot of testing, and we also then hosted and developed the website where the e-learning content sits. In terms of how we did all that, if anybody has kind of any further questions, I'd be more than willing to access it. I'm not going to get too much into it now. But very basically, the e-learning content was built using a tool called Adapt, or the Adapt Builder. The website was built using WordPress. And then we worked with translators in our 4 different organizations. And we also created a detailed user guide. And I'll point you to where you can find that if anyone needs any assistance or help. And again, we did rigorous testing just to ensure that it met these kind of, you know, high accessibility standards that we set ourselves. And what we learned that translations take time. So if any of you are ever getting involved of any one of these Erasmus Plus or EU learning projects or whatever, any kind of time that's been budgeted to translation, I would say double it straight away. That would be my biggest learning from this. So patience is also a virtue. We made mistakes, other partners made mistakes, but you know, you learn from that, and we kind of were able to develop something of use as we went on. Striving to meet these accessibility standards were quite difficult, but we feel it was very much worth the effort, because what we have now is something that, because it's so accessible, it also looks aesthetically and visually quite pleasing. So in meeting those AAA accessibility standards, we're also able to develop something as a result of that looks quite well, we feel. And we also find that there's nothing like a crisis to promote a rethink. So we're all here virtually because of, you know, COVID. We wouldn't have been able to reach so many of you without, you know, going online. So that's been a big factor in it. And what I'm going to do now is I might just give you a quick look at what the platform actually looks like. So just bear with me 1 second. I'm just going to change my share. Okay, so what you should be able to see now is my screen, I believe, and this is what the actual website looks like. So the website hosts the platform. So when people arrive on the site, there'll be a little drop-down flag here in the top, and that will give you the option to change your nationality. So if any of you want to do it in Finnish, you're more than welcome, but I assume you'll want to see the Irish version. And very simply, just by clicking this button here, Start Learning, that will bring you to this page, which hosts the modules. So if you scroll down, there are 5 modules: governance, finance, fundraising, communications, and risk. You can do them in any order you like. And by clicking the begin button, it'll launch the content. Before we do that, I just want to point people down here towards the user guide. So we put a lot of effort into creating kind of a detailed user guide. So if anybody needs any help or technical assistance, just going down here to the user guide and clicking here will launch a PDF that should, you know, answer any questions anyone might have. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly show people what one of the modules looks like. So a sample module is the governance module. I'm just going to give you kind of a preview of what that looks like. And that should be appearing on your screen now. So when you're here on the Start Learning page, if you just click the Begin button, this will launch in a new tab one of our modules. So this is a sample module, this is governance. This is the menu page. So when people come to the menu page, the first thing that they'll see is a little introduction, and they'll see a list of topics, and then they'll say your badge with a little kind of lock on it. So in order to get the badge, what people have to do is they have to complete the recap section first, and then this badge will unlock, and then you can apply for the badge. You don't have to do all of the topics. If you want, if you're already an expert in the field, you can go straight through the recap. It's entirely up to you, but obviously you'll get more out of it if you go through the things piece by piece. So if I click here on topic 1, what this will do is this will open one of the pages. So we can see here, just by scrolling down, there's kind of text. There are these kind of interactive elements on screen. So it's not just kind of a passive experience. You're not just sitting there just reading and falling asleep. There are kind of little elements that you can kind of click and engage with as you go. And you can also click these little pins here, for example, and these will kind of bring up more little interactive and engaging elements. And also as you go, there's the case studies that Mairead was keen to point out, and little kind of tests and activities along the way. So you can just take these little tests, you can select your answer, click submit, you'll get feedback. That was a lucky guess. And as you go, you'll be able to kind of see and assess your progress. Okay. And then when people read the bottom of the page, there's a little home button here, which will bring them back home, or they can click the arrow here to take themselves onto the next module, or they can just scroll back up and do it all again. Before I kind of just take you a little bit further, there are some kind of features on the page that I'd like to point out to people. So just up on top here, my little home menu button here, this will take me back to the main menu. So let's click that. And you can see here that my progress is indicated by this little progress bar. So I'm nearly finished topic 1. My progress has filled up about this far. So that shows me, how much I've done. And if I return to topic 1, I can also see up here another little progress bar up here on top that tells me I've completed this much. And if you're unsure that you've forgotten something or you've left something out, you can just click the little progress bar. And that gives a little pop-up of all the activities. And I can see here that I haven't answered any of the multiple choice questions because they're so colored white. So I'll just exit out of that. Other little features that we're kind of keen to point out up on top in the top menu are up here. There's a little kind of a drawer icon. So just clicking here. What this does is it opens a little search bar. So if there is something that I've come across, like a key term or something, I can just search for it here. And just by clicking here on any of my results, it will take me immediately to that little keyword. So again, if you've covered something in a module you found interesting, but you want to find it quickly, you can just do it up there in the little search bar. Another feature that we're keen to point out here as well is the resources section. So we weren't able to kind of pack absolutely everything we wanted into the module, but there are kind of extra resources. And just by clicking here in the resources section, this will open an entire list of kind of extra, features that we think people might find of interest. So kind of more detailed, kind of technical stuff that, wouldn't be maybe that fitting for an introductory module, but will give people a lot of extra guidance. So for example, here, if I click on this link here, this will take me to the guidance for charity trustees, and that will, link externally to that website. And as you can see here, there's a lot of kind of extra resources that we think people will find useful. So I'll just close that. Another kind of very key feature that we're keen to stress is the accessibility. So a lot of time and effort has gone into making this, this platform as accessible as possible. So by activating this little kind of accessibility icon up here on top, what that does is that will allow kind of screen readers to access the site. So you might see a little kind of yellow bar appearing here around text. If I was using a screen reader, obviously I'm not using one now, but if I was using a screen reader, I would now be able to kind of read the text and interact with the elements here, just and so on. This kind of moves down the screen then as I go. And another feature that we were quite fond of is our dyslexia helper. So just here, this little eye icon here in the top right corner, by clicking this, I am able to change the kind of color palette. And what that does is if I had kind of a visual impairment, it would make the screen much easier to read. So I'm just going to make that accessible now. As you can see, what that has done is it's changed kind of the background here. So the text kind of is now appearing on a different background. I'll just change the color again, maybe to a different one. And the idea here is that that has made kind of the text more legible and kind of easier to read and engage with. I'm just going to return back to the home. So the accessibility button is on at the moment, but again, you can see here, it's made the learning content down here kind of easier to read and engage with. What I might do is I might just show you just quickly then just what another module looks like. So this is governance again. This is another
Shane,
module called
to
finance
interrupt.
basics.
You're
Yeah.
just coming to an end of your time.
Okay, I'll stop now. Okay, but basically just to show people that again, kind of there's a different kind of theme and artwork through each module, but I'm sure people will get to see that as they go. Okay, so that's me. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen there, and just before I finish, there's one little thing I just want to show people, and that is just kind of a thank you. Sorry, Lauren, but I just want to say a big thank you to my colleague, stop sharing, my colleague Matthew Waters, who contributed a lot, and we'll put links to the resource and to myself and Matthew afterwards. So thanks everyone, and please use it.
Shane, thanks a million for that, and my apologies for having to cut you off in the middle of your presentation. But just to follow on from what you were saying, each of the modules have a different kind of artistic theme. It's probably not the right language to use, but you will see it as you work through the program. So we are halfway through our intellectual outputs. I'm going to talk to you now quickly about intellectual output 3 and 4. So we're keeping an eye on the chat box, and we'll be handing over to Emma very shortly to respond to any questions that are in there. So let me share my slides with you once more. Okay, so intellectual output 3 is the validation system or digital badges that you've heard about now this morning. This output was led by our Finnish partners, Civis Study Centre. They have a lot of experience in validating learning and validating skills, and digital badges are something that they are big advocates of, and they use widely in the nonprofit sector and further education sector in Finland. So they were the perfect partner to lead on this output. They're quite new to us here in Ireland, not something that we have come across, but some universities and institutes of technology are using them, and digital badges are something that we got excited about in the Wheel and the wider partnership 2 years ago. So we're hoping to share that with you because they have so much potential for communicating the learning and the skill development and the training that we undertake here in the sector in Ireland. So what were the objectives of this output? We wanted to develop a validation system that recognises non-formal learning. We wanted to develop a means of communicating the learning and the skills within our sector and the wider European third sector. And we wanted to encourage greater visibility of our skills and competencies. And how we will do this is through the use of digital badges, which will sit in the Open Badge Passport. They're shareable on social media, and you can also download a digital certificate. So lots of opportunity to share your learning. Ultimately, our goal is that badges are widely recognised and widely used across the sector here in Ireland and indeed across all partnership countries. So, as I said, Civis led us on this intellectual output. What we achieved through this objective were badges for all modules in all partner languages, including a 6th bumper badge. So what is automatically awarded is a Scope alumni badge if you complete all 5 of your modules, apply for your digital badge and accept your digital badge. The system will recognise that you have completed them and will award you with this bumper badge. Throughout the pilot, we got feedback from the testers from the 2 pilot processes across the partner countries that 88% of testers were satisfied with this validation system. And overall, 1,100 badge applications were made, meaning that the learning outcomes of our modules were achieved 1,100 times. One of the kind of outsider stats that we collected as a result of the two-part pilot process was that 46% of testers reported that badges improved their ability to share skills and knowledge. Now, this is a little lower than we would have hoped for. We actually set ourselves a benchmark of 80% satisfaction across everything that we tested during the pilots. But on reflection, there are some reasons for this. Firstly, we feel that maybe the time frame for the project was a little too short. So we were overly ambitious with what we hoped to achieve. We introduced the concept of digital badges through this project, but maybe the 2 years or really 1 year, so the second half of the project, wasn't enough time to mainstream this. So we have a little bit more work to do there. We need to invest further in the benefits and promote them further. We, as I said, thought that the project duration was a little too short, but we do know that they have huge potential. And we are going to delve a little deeper into that. And you can read about that in the project study. I've highlighted the page here, so it's page 28 to 30. We have, across all partners, committed to adopting a validation system recognition strategy. Now that's a mouthful, but it will make sense. Basically, all partners are super enthusiastic about the digital badges and the recognition of skills and learning. And it's something that we're going to carry forward and make sure that it continues to live on and to grow and develop following on from this project. Sorry, I should say that these little icons here are the 5 digital badges, with this gold cup being the bumper badge. I'll skim over this slide just in the interest of time, but if you want to refer back, this came from our pilot results and it just shows the top issued and top accepted badges. And you'll see that there's some difference in the numbers because you have the option to accept your badge or not, and accepting the badges is something that we will be working on just to ensure that you follow through the entire process to the end. If you do go through the process of completing your governance module, for example, you can then go on and unlock your digital badge. You go through 2 short self-reflective questions that kind of validates your learning, gives you an opportunity to reflect on what you've taken in over the course of your training module. And you can apply for your digital badge. This picture here is just a screenshot from my open badge passport. So I have completed all of my 5 modules and received my bumper badge, which means I'm Scope alumni. And that is public. It can be shared along with my responses to the self-reflective questions so that others can see the areas that I've trained in and the skills that I have. And over time, we'd like to grow how we share this. So there's possibilities to link it to your social media platforms, so whether that's your LinkedIn profile, your Twitter profile, that type of thing. And as we expand on the awareness of digital badges, it'll be something that we hope will become more easily recognizable across our sector. At this stage, I just want to invite my colleague Mairead O'Connor back on just to have a chat about the use of this concept. So Mairead, I'll hand over to you and pop myself on mute.
Hi folks, I suppose just to reiterate really what Lauren has said, from our point of view in the wheel, and I know from the wider partnership as well, digital badges are something that we're keen to get behind. From I think the wider conversation around skills recognition at national and EU policy level is definitely one that's growing in importance, and I think the flexibility and the responsiveness that digital badges allow and other micro credentials as they're called is something that we're very excited about from our own the training that we provide, which for the most part is non-formal learning, and the digital badge offers us a way to validate that. So beyond the Scope platform itself, I think there's huge opportunities for a lot of the training that happens within the sector to utilize the tool that is the digital badge. So we're really keen to kind of get behind it, raise awareness amongst providers of training like ourselves, and also obviously amongst the learners that participate in training right across the sector. Because I suppose from a career and educational progression point of view, the digital badge is a really nice entry-level stepping stone to take you a lot further in both your career and in your educational journey. So we think really exciting times ahead, but a lot of work to be done by, I suppose the broader sector, training and education sector, and also then within the nonprofit world where we, I suppose, focus our energies. So you'll be hearing lots more from us about digital badges and about the Scope digital badges in the first instance over the coming year or so. Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks, Emil Mairead. Okay, so that actually brings me to our final intellectual output, which is intellectual output 4. I'm hoping my screen will cooperate. It is not, so I'm going to stop share and I'm going to start again. Bear with me. Okay, so intellectual output 4. This was led by our Scottish partners, so the Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations, or SCVO. Essentially, they are the Scottish version of the Wheel. They're a very similar organisation to us, a membership-based organisation. They had responsibility for intellectual output 4, which was split into 2 parts. So there was firstly the pilot and then the project study. So what we wanted to achieve through the pilot was rigorous testing, I suppose, to make sure that when we got to this point today, we had a really well polished, really accessible, really well thought out training platform for you to use. So we carried out a 2-part pilot in each partner country, and our primary target group for the purpose of this project was small organisations with between 1 to 5 staff. Now, I mentioned earlier on in my presentation that Scope is open free of charge to absolutely everybody, so there are no limitations on who can access this now going forward. It will remain free of charge and it will remain open access in the spirit of Erasmus+. So we wanted throughout the pilots to test the clarity, quality and impact of the content. We wanted to test the accessibility of the learning platform. We wanted to test the use of the validation system, and we set ourselves a benchmark of 80% satisfaction rate among testers. And I mentioned earlier the 46% in relation to communicating your learning through the use of digital badges. That is the only place where we fell short. Otherwise, we far exceeded the 80% satisfaction rate among testers. So I'm really, really happy to share that, because it was real validation of the need for this project and the work that had gone into it over the 2 years. So some pilot results. We engaged with, I think it was 209, so just over 200 testers across 2 pilots in each partner country. We rigorously tested both the training content and platform as well as the validation system, again in all language versions. We had 1,100 badge applications. We picked up on many bugs and errors that were addressed and improved after the first pilot, and then indeed after the second pilot. So 2 rounds of feedback and improvements were made. And we learned, as I said, that we need to invest a little bit more time into promoting the benefits of digital badges. The pilots, what we used to collect the feedback were exit surveys and focus groups. So 2 different types of feedback across the 2 different rounds. I mentioned earlier that we decided not to incorporate a login into Scope, which made it a little bit more difficult for us to track who participated. So although we have evidence of 209 testers as a result of them completing their exit surveys, we believe that many more people progressed through the training, and that's linked to some of the activity in relation to digital badges. So definitely a login is something we will consider going forward. These are just some of the high-level stats that came back. So something that stands out to me is that 92% of respondents reported increased confidence in all 5 areas. So that's really promising. And 95% would recommend Scope to a friend or colleague. So really high success rate with people's satisfaction of the Scope training and validation system. The second part of the fourth intellectual output was to produce a project study. So we wanted to provide a replicable best practice model that provides a guide to future sustainability and exploitation of the platform for partners and for the wider third sector. So what does that mean? That basically means that we wanted to showcase what we did, our methodology, our approach, our intellectual outputs and work plan and activity, what went well for us and the mistakes that we made. So the idea is that if you pick up this study, you can replicate a program like this in your own country or develop something similar to Scope. So both the executive summary and the project study will be shared with you afterwards, and you can get a lot more in-depth information on the Scope project there, but it is a tangible output from this intellectual output. That brings me actually to the end of the presentations on the intellectual outputs. So at this stage, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Emma, who has been keeping an eye on the chat box. My understanding is now that the speakers should pop back up on screen with their cameras on, but Emma, I'll hand over to you to instruct us.
Great, thank you, Lauren. Can everybody hear me? Maybe Lauren, give me a thumbs up. Great, okay, perfect. So thanks everybody for being here today. Just take your opportunity now. If you have any questions at all, pop them into the chat box. We've had one or two, but we've been kind of answering them as we go. So we've got some really lovely feedback, so that's really nice. As I'm waiting for, if there are any last questions that you want to pop in, I'll introduce myself. My name is Emma Murta. I'm the Grants Research Officer at The Wheel. So I actually wrote the Scope project back in 2018. So this is a really cool day for me to see something that once just lived in my head actually be done and launched into the world. So it's really great. And I'm just very, very proud of all my colleagues and lovely to see all the really nice feedback that we've gotten. So that's the only kind of question that's really popped up now. And as I said, other people, if you want to just pop in any last ones that you have, was about the digital badges and how they might fit in with the national qualifications framework. And I think we might have clarified it a bit, but I might ask Mairead to maybe comment on that they obviously fit into the kind of European qualifications framework, but how are they going to fit within national frameworks, and how does that work in terms of recognition of prior learning and all of that. So Mairead, if you just have a comment on that, and anybody else just throw in your questions now.
Thanks, Emma, and thanks, I think it was Mary for the question, and it's definitely something that we're hoping to develop. We, as I say, from the outset, we were very keen that using the digital badge and working with our partners in Civis in Finland, that we would I suppose, make sure that we were working within the framework of the European qualification framework, because we're working on a transnational project. But we now kind of have to do the work of translating it into, if you like, the context here in Ireland. And we would like to, we'd probably be working with our partners here more locally then to really develop how we integrate the Scope platform, the digital badges from Scope into, the national context. And I think there's an awful lot of potential here in, even beyond Scope for how we use digital badges within the context of, I suppose, the national qualifications framework and other standards here in Ireland. So I think there's a lot of work to be done on it. I don't think we're there yet, but this is kind of the beginning, the first step in a much longer journey. So, but I'm open. I suppose one thing I'd say when I have the platform here is really keen to have conversations with others. So I think there are lots of people on the call here today who have an interest in this area. So please do get in touch. We're really keen to have conversations around this. So mairead@wheel.ie, if I can be so cheeky as to give out my email address. And we'd really like to engage with anybody who's interested.
Great, thank you, Mairead. And I think Mary did mention a few things there of how they might be able to work together with us to help keep resources up to date, keep content up to date. People have asked about that and absolutely agree that that is vital. This cannot just be a thing that is now static. It needs to be kept alive. So we're absolutely committed to that. And if you have resources that you come across that you think would be useful to share, you know, like why not make it an interactive process where you can keep us updated and we'll keep the platform updated as well. So if anybody here today has things that they think might kind of add value to the platform, please do feel free to share them, and it's marie@wheel.ie, or can send them to info@wheel.ie and they'll find the right place. Another question just popped up. Well, there was a question about, does the search box in the platform search all the material in the system? And Shane just pointed out that it was the governance. If you're in the governance module, it'll check the governance module, it won't check all of them. But another question was about how and where may we access the content? Can we set up our colleagues and board to track their progress as part of professional development? So I suppose I can briefly answer that, you'll receive a link after this session, and you'll have the link to the platform, and it'll be freely available. You can set up any friends, colleagues, whoever you like that you feel might benefit from it. It's open and accessible for all. In terms of tracking their progress, this was something that we, you know, if we'd had that kind of login system, we might be able to do, but the good thing, I suppose, about not having a login system is that you don't have to log in. So it just means that a way of kind of tracking progress would be obviously the digital badges. So if the person completes their digital badge, if they complete the module and do the recap, which is necessary for them to unlock their digital badge, they can generate their kind of badge from that, and do a self-reflective piece where they kind of reflect on their learning and summarize it, and that kind of generates a badge that they can share on profiles like LinkedIn, but it's also kind of a certificate as well. So Mairead, am I right in that? Is there anything you want to add to that in terms of how it recognizes your learning?
No, I think you've summarized it well there.
Yeah, so the badge will generate kind of a certificate, and in the certificate you will see where the person kind of reflected on their learning. So it's actually a really good way of recognizing learning. It's not just ticking boxes and generating a certificate. There's even a piece where they can talk about what this learning has meant to them and what they've taken from it. So it's a really good kind of person-centered way of recognizing learning, and it's very kind of accessible across all abilities and from all points of view. So that's how you can access the content. Just one moment now and I'll make this bigger. When will it be available? It's available now, and it will be, you'll receive the link after this. How much time commitment approximately is required to complete? Maybe Mairead, you'd be able to comment on that from each module.
Yeah, on average, it should take less than an hour to complete them. Again, it'll obviously vary, but that they've been pitched at about that, so they take about an hour or less.
Brilliant. Okay, well, this is definitely a question for Shane. As there's no login feature, is the site using the computer's IP address to resume learning, to see that two people could use the same computer? So yeah, this is the issue that we have, that you have to kind of finish a module in one sitting. Shane, can you explain that?
Yeah, so basically, just to put a caveat on it, like the cost of putting in something that would kind of put in some kind of a login or tracking feature was way in excess of what this project was funded for or what it could support. So basically, if you want to track your progress, what you do is, if you sit in and if you just start working away in a module, that's fine. And if you keep the tab open, obviously it'll log your progress. If you close the tab, then your progress will be lost. That is, but I mean, once you reopen the tab, it's very easy to find, where you are, because each section is divided into like 5 or 6 different topics. So you can just very quickly just find your way back. And then in terms of the badge, every time, if you want to access the badge, you will have to complete the recap section, and then the little, the badge topic will open. If you close down your tab and if you come back, then that badge will be locked again. So anytime you want to access the badge, you'll have to complete. So yeah, so 2 people using the same computer, that wouldn't work. No, you'd have to do it every time. I hope that answers your question there, Alice.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. That's great, and I'd say lots of people are saying that they could use it as part of, like, with volunteers, with service users even, because it's a very accessible kind of way to upskill and to recognise kind of the non-formal learning that is happening through things like volunteering and participating in the sector. So great to see that. Is there any other questions, or will I hand over to, I'll just say there's another one that might have, is it accessible from a mobile phone? Shane, I'll be calling on you again. You can see you nodding anyway, so maybe.
Yeah, it's designed to be very accessible, so it doesn't matter what device you use, it'll scale to whatever device you use. And sorry, someone just came up there on the tracking part. So okay, so just to clarify, your progress is not tracked essentially. So when you log in, you can just sit down and do a module, complete it, get your badge. But if you were to shut down your computer and come back, your progress would be lost, okay? So again, don't worry about that. It's very easy to find where you were. You don't have to complete all of the topics to get a badge. You don't have to do everything. You can just, if you want, you can skip to the quiz at the end. We wouldn't advise that, but you can do that if you want. So tracking is, it's not necessary, okay? And if you want something that would indicate your progress, then just do the quiz at the end, get the badge, you'll have the badge forever. So, that will never be lost. So long, obviously, as you provide the right email. And okay. Yeah. So if you have any other questions there about the tracking, just fire away. Thanks.
Thanks, Shane. Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose because we mentioned earlier that each module takes about an hour to complete, so it is very doable to do it in one sitting as well if you wanted to, or you can work your way through the module and then just come back and do the recap at any point and earn your badge then, if that's what you want to do. Is there any other questions? Fire away now. We've got lots of really nice comments, so that's great, and ways that we can kind of see ways people are seeing that they can implement the project. Shane, does a user have to save the URL as a bookmark and resume from there to follow the following morning or the following session?
How to phrase it? It's not so big that you would get lost. It would be kind of, just as I'll say, kind of at a higher level thing. The resources are not like so gigantic that someone would never be able to find where they were. It's the same URL that kind of launches. So if you bookmark the URL, it would only just relaunch the module again. So no, that wouldn't work, and we tried that, unfortunately. So that wouldn't work. But again, it's not something to worry about. If you don't have time to do it all, you can just go as far as number 3. That's fine. Close it down, and then come back and just start from 3 again. Do 4, 5, and 6, and then do the badge. Okay. So like tracking progress is not. It's not something people would have to worry about. Okay, yeah. No worries, Darren, thanks.
Perfect. And I think that people will see that in practice as well, I suppose. Right now, they're kind of haven't been able to actually play around with it themselves, but I'm sure that they will, and they'll be able to see that it is quite easy to kind of pick up where you left off and take it in your own time. Just a suggestion from Maeve about using Canvas. I don't know, Shane, have you heard of Canvas about for tracking progress, and that it could be an option? So good suggestion from Maeve. Shane, are you familiar with Canvas?
That might be something we might look at for scope 2. There's a good suggestion, but for now we're not going to put it behind anything that would require a login or any kind of tracking. It's just an open access website, and we want to keep it as simple and open access as possible. So that's why it is the way it is.
Perfect. Yeah, and absolutely, that was very intentional. We were aware that, and Mairead mentioned that the project was very intense, particularly at the beginning, and that was my fault because I wrote it like that. But sorry about that, colleagues. But yeah, we were fully aware of what we were undertaking in this, like that, just the building of the platform, the translation, the development of the content. We were trying to make it as simple and as straightforward, but fully intending that there would be other phases of the project and future developments where we can take the learnings that we gathered through scope 1 and implement them hopefully into a scope 2. So we're looking at what that might look like now. My poor exhausted colleagues are probably not eager for me to start immediately developing a scope 2, but no, we're definitely taking all of these suggestions and absolutely believe that there's lots more that can be done with the platform, both to keep it updated and then to add extra features that we just wouldn't have been able to do within the time frame of this project. So that's great. Any limitation on browsers? Again, Shane, sorry, you're getting, I can see you saying no anyway, so. Yeah.
No, there was no limitations in any of the pilots. None of that was flagged, so no, there shouldn't be. As long as you can access the internet, you should be fine. It's a very simple resource.
Great. And just is there plans to expand on subject areas covered in time and levels? And absolutely, yeah, that's exactly what, when we're talking about new phases of the project, when we have this one completely finished at the end of this month, we'll look at the kind of new phases and how we can develop it further. And there's a number of different ways that we can do that. So that's what we're exploring now. So great, nice feedback from everybody. That's great. Okay. Well, if there aren't any other questions, we can finish up a little bit early because we were answering questions throughout the session as well. And I think what we've had here is a very kind of clear presentation from everybody. It's a very simple, straightforward, but really effective and hopefully really impactful resource for the whole sector. So it's a good thing that it's clear and that people are understanding it. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Deirdre Garvey, our CEO, just for final remarks on this, and just to say thank you to everybody for all of the lovely comments. It's great. So Deirdre, over to you when you're ready.
Thank you very much. And I have turned on my camera and my microphone, but because I've managed to hide my self-view, I don't know if people can see me or hear me. So I'm just going to look to Lauren and maybe get her to confirm that I can be seen.
Yep, you can be seen and you can be heard.
Thanks very much. So much for giving out good advice of technology nature, but I will proceed. So I think, and I just see all of the really interesting comments and the positive comments back from people through the chat room. So thank you so much for that, but particularly thank you to the colleagues, both in Ireland on Cason and my colleagues in the Wheel, who have worked really hard on this. And actually, it was a joy to sit here and just listen to a piece of work that I've heard. We're working on scope. I can't imagine, the amount of times that I have heard through staff meetings that, we're doing this part of scope, we're doing that part of scope, but actually to see it all come together after 2 years, like I've just been sitting here, to be perfectly honest, luxuriating in the pleasure of seeing it all come to pass. So I share your, I guess, pleasure in having such a simple tool. Can it be better? Can it be more useful to organizations who want to do the login and to keep it going overnight, etc.? Of course, but all of those will happen in scope 2, we hope, fingers crossed. So thank you for joining us today. We would encourage you to go through the scope training online, and as Heidi said, everybody who's here today, to have your staff and your team members to go through it. I went through a few of the modules last week, and I'll be going through more of them, and indeed we'll be asking all of our staff to do it in the Wheel, because it's really, really helpful, even just sort of as a refresher, and it's just a great, easy to use tool. And then we can talk to other people about it if we've used it ourselves. But if you have feedback or queries, don't hesitate to get in touch with us in the Wheel. Lauren is available, you know her now, lauren@wheel.ie, and obviously we'll be sharing the link to scope, the project study and the slides later this afternoon. And I particularly found the output around the project study and the report and the learnings and the findings, and then I found that particularly interesting read. So we're really grateful to all of the team at Cason, and they've just been brilliant partners, and you've seen that from Shane. Just thank you for your technical expertise and careful guidance throughout the project. So as mentioned earlier, Lergas are the National Agency for Erasmus Plus here in Ireland, and they have training coming up as well on all upcoming funding deadlines on their website. So please, do link in with Lergas if you're interested in either their training or their upcoming funding deadlines. We are in one sense case in point that it's possible, and we've done it with Cason, and we'll be doing it again. So that's, I guess, our learning journey on that side of things. So finally, just a sort of a little plug at the end, many of you will be interested in the Charity Impact Awards that we've been running for the last number of years. And I just wanted to say that entry is now open, and we'd really love to hear from you before 2nd of October. And we're going to be hosting a bells and whistles ceremony, albeit online, in December to celebrate the impact of our wonderful sector at community level, national level, and every level in between, small, medium and large organisations, social enterprises, and indeed trustees, to use that language of the EU, the third sector in all its manifestations and diversity. So please get involved, visit charityimpactawards.ie for more. And I'm just going to sign off really now by thanking you for coming. It was great to have so many people here, and really enjoyed listening to my colleagues and colleagues from An Chosán, but particularly enjoyed seeing the reaction as this little baby of some of my colleagues is going out publicly in the world today. So thank you for the support, and good luck, and use it and possibly even abuse it, and tell us how we can do better with it in the next phase. And have a good day, and I'll sign off from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Deirdre. I'm just going to end the meeting now for everyone, but you will receive the recording, all going well, along with the slides and the report and all the necessary links. I've just popped the link for Scope into the chat box so you can have a first look at it directly after the event if you'd like to. But thanks so much for joining us, and we will talk to you all again soon. So do keep in touch.